know that gallery founder, Bill Reaves, is here with us today. And we would not be here having this exhibition if not for Bill early in another part of his career, correct me if I misspeak, when he was a school administrator down in Palacios. Fidencio was one of the first artists in residence that you had in the school system there, and he followed his career, and we were just thrilled. I guess we started working with you about 2 years ago, and here we are. So without further ado, Fidencio.
Thank you. Stand in front of the paintings. If you don't feel, I feel comfortable standing up. I work standing up. I breathe better standing up. So I'll stand for a while. I want to thank Sarah and Bill and Linda, his wife, for having invited me to put this show together. Back in September, July, they came to the house and studio and talked to me about having the show, invited me to have an exhibit, and asked me what it was that I would like for it to be about. And I told them there's certain things, certain images and stories that I've had in my head for a long time. I've never really put them down on paper. I've never made paintings out of those. And they were very excited just about that idea. And so I'm thankful for your support and the energy behind my sitting down and doing these ideas. These are mostly stories that were related to me from my father. Stories that he would repeat very often about the early days when they came to the United States from Mexico and why they came, how they lived, and how they worked. But most of it is taken from my own observations. When I'm the third youngest of 10, and there's a 20-year span of children in my family from 48 to 68, and I'm the third youngest. So a lot of these things I did see were still living as tenant farmers when up until I was 5 years old. Actually, until I was maybe even 7 or 8, we did some work like that in the fields. I didn't. I was too young, too small. But my older brothers and my father, and a lot of our cousins, and that was just the way that people lived. The Mexican American community, not just Mexican American, but a lot of people lived as tenant farmers, until probably the 50s or so. When mechanization became more popular and more affordable, you didn't need as many people, working on the land. And so, I'm very thankful that I did have that, or my family had that experience, because it's very different from an urban experience. And if anything, it provided us with, opportunities, for example, to grow gardens and to be outdoors and be together as a family. I think that was probably my parents and my family's kind of main motivation, was to keep people together. Their backgrounds was not urban in Mexico. They were from outside of León, Guanajuato, in an area around León, Guanajuato. So they were not urbanized. They didn't live in the city. They worked on the land, and those are the same, I guess, practices and experiences that they brought with them. And there were a lot of people from the same region that also came. During this whole body of work, I did a lot of research and found out that there was like almost 200,000 people that immigrated specifically from Guanajuato, from central Mexico, and made their way to the United States, in California or Texas, mostly California and Texas. And I know that to be a fact because the stories my father told me about his uncles that took their families and went in different directions. But that's the background, and I thought it would be significant because there's so much conversation and discussion about recent immigrants from Mexico specifically. It's been going on for a long time, but more specifically in the last 10 or 15 years, it's kind of gotten to the point where people are more aware of it and the impact that immigration has had on the economy and the culture and just overall appearance of things. So I thought it would be interesting to talk or to show paintings of how things were for people that immigrated, say 100 years ago, 1920, 1928. It's not quite 100 years ago, but it was a very different time. And I just wanted to show these things and see what people's reaction would be as to how they relate to it. And I was very pleasantly surprised that most people can relate to it. It's like, because most art, I guess, is urban inspired to a degree, and it's urban based aesthetically to a large degree. But in Texas, it's very different because there's so much that's not urban. There's so much that is rural. There's so many people, small towns everywhere. And I know that because I met Bill working through Arts and Education, Texas Commission on the Arts, and I worked a lot of smaller towns, Palacios, out west, and they're all very, very interesting. Those are very similar communities where, like the ones that I grew up in Lockhart, Texas. Is there any questions? I'd really rather have it be more of a discussion than just be talking about things. Are there any things that you want me that you'd like me to address or speak about or anything at the point of discussion? I'm calling you. You seem to be observing.
I was trying to think of a question.
Oh.
Are these from memory, or are you going back to the places?
No, they are from memory. They're from memory. They start from memory. In fact, my earlier body work, I've been doing this kind of work since 1982 or 83. And I started just by drawing from memory, like literally from memory. And I was very fortunate to have, in my arts education in junior high, to have had a teacher that did a demonstration of how you use a single, double, and three-point perspective in 6th grade. And she was on the chalkboard, said, okay, this is how you draw a house, this is how you draw a building, a skyscraper, and this is how you draw say flying saucers and stuff like that. But that experience, to this day, I use it every time, and I can say, okay, this is the idea, and I'll start with just a rough sketch. And I usually start with the figure, with the person, the character that I'm trying to involve in this scene, and I focus on the characters first, and I have the setting in mind, but then I develop the setting around the character so that aesthetically, so that it's pleasing, so it's interesting in terms of the positive and negative space and how it fits into the overall abstract composition. But yeah, I started from memory, and before my earlier drawings and works, you can tell that I didn't use that many photo references. In fact, I did hardly use any. So I would draw them figures. And if you look at my body of work from, say, the early 80s, you can tell that at first I'm drawing just from memory. I'm not using a model. I'm using what I know about the figure and what I can draw about the figure. And that's how it starts, and I keep developing it through time. And now these bodies of works, I have more access to images. I can find models to pose, take photographs. I can find references on the computer or in books that are related to what I'm trying to present. And I take that and I change it. I make it my own. Whereas before, it was, I would have to go to the library and go through books. So it's much more accessible. I'm sure everybody here has a computer and they all see images all the time. So you can find things like, right now I'm working on a work about weighing cotton, or not picking cotton, but weighing cotton in the field. Okay, how do people do that? And I found images of people they prop up a tripod and hang the scale and hang the bag of cotton on that. So information like that has allowed me to make these kinds of presentations more, I guess, more believable, more naturalistic, and just more informed. But yes.
It's peculiar how these things are like right in our backyard, and some of us come from these places, or our family do, and pictures and information about this world that was taking place like 150 years ago, something like that. It's strange how more accessible it is, how easier it is to get there, but there's also this this massive other amount of information you have to sift through in order to get to these. To these worlds, yeah.
No, you're right. It is. It's a lot of looking at images and finding stuff that I can use. Find one out of hundreds.
So when you speak about these things being drawn from memory, this kind of fills in a void for the narrative that I've had with something else. With one of my mentors, is a Mexican American guy who grew up in South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley, and he explains to me the life and everything else, but a few pictures that he had, if you like overlay them over like this scene, I mean, it captures he keeps trying to feed into me the struggle and the things that they went through and the hard work that they had as kids. He was a migrant farm worker hoeing sugar beets in South Texas, so he went through it, and with only having seen a few pictures of him and his age and him having multiple brothers, like this picture right here kind of makes me relate and understand a little bit more what he was going through. Most in that he can only only described it so well, but now I'm seeing the pictures and I'm seeing like his narrative crosses a lot.
So
His narrative agrees to a lot of different people. Like,
Yeah. No, I agree, and it's surprising, not surprising, I should not be surprised.
your memories interchange with his.
Yeah, a lot of people share similar experiences, especially among the Mexican-American community. Just the other day, a woman that I worked with years ago was excited about the little booklet because her husband's family lived in Lockhart, and they had similar experiences. You know, there's a John Quinones, the broadcaster. His family lived in Lockhart for a time, and they were migrant farmers and stuff like that. You know, they followed the crops and all this and that. So, well, I'm glad. You know, when I had the idea of doing this show, I told one of my older brothers, he's 10 years older than I am, and he did. I mean, they worked since they were 6 and 7 years old, and they picked cotton until end of September, went back to school late, or they lived that life more than I did. And I said, well, who's going to be interested in knowing this stuff? And why? I said, well, I said, you lived it, and there's not many people that have lived it, even though I'm very young, have lived it and can talk about it and present pictures. And, other people that I've told about these kinds of experiences, well, you're not that old. That couldn't have happened, and you're only how old? Well, no, it did, And there probably are still people that live in a similar manner. If you go out, Texas is a huge state. You go off the highway and see all these ranches and farms. I'm sure there's people living out there that work in the land, quietly, and that's their life. So it does exist.
Can you speak a little bit about your mural work and how your family narratives maybe have been incorporated into those? I mean, I know that some of those are grander sort of ideas and narratives, but maybe how your family narratives have
How the similarities
come in.
Well, I guess the best example of that is a mural at the airport, the Austin Bergstrom International, called The Visit, and it's a 9-panel image. And it's based on a Sunday get-together at my grandmother's house. That's really the one mural where my own personal narrative was presented in a very straightforward manner. But the other murals that I've done have always incorporated aspects of the community itself, and there are a lot of similarities. I can think of in Austin there's a Saragossa Recreation Center. I did 3 panels on the interior, and it tells the story of the founding of the recreation center, the park, and the people that were involved. And it's very similar to our experiences. In this case, they were business people that organized the park, they organized the programming, so specifically for 16 and Cinco de Mayo, they held these like 4-day, several weekend parties where people would literally camp out in the park. And they would have these festivals. And it was mostly people from the outskirts, sharecroppers and farmers and stuff like that would come in to the city. So I found a lot of similarities, with those people's experiences, which occurred maybe 20 years before ours. And so I think there's a lot of similarities there. But I always incorporate things, I guess, that relate to my family into the different murals in different ways. It can be with food, it can be through food. For example, last year I painted a mural for a hospital. It had to do with cultural interaction through food. And so I thought of the Jamaicas, which are church bazaars that happen in the spring. I can all kinds of different, like a booth, like you go to the farmer's market or you go to the trucks that, with food you go, but it's a big family thing, and so that was what I wanted. I wanted the piece to have that flavor, that atmosphere of variety of things, different foods, and of course I incorporated an international kind of subject matter into that idea. But practically everything I do, in some form or the other, I do relate it to like my own experiences, or how would I, how am I going to present this that's accessible? I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. I have another one too.
Sure.
When we were talking about laying out the exhibition, and there's been a lot of comments of how the panoramic format really suits the idea of a narrative image, and how that kind of tells a story just in the format that it's in. And then when you have the smaller pieces that seem to be little windows, I guess, can you speak a little bit? I'm curious about how you feel. I guess the question is if that comes from your experience doing murals and essentially shrinking that into a more intimate.
Yeah, not necessarily. I don't think that they necessarily come from painting murals per se, which I've painted murals because I did when I was in high school, I did a painting that was like 6 by 12 feet long, 6 by 12. And that format, I really like the format for some reason. I think it relates a lot to, in my opinion, it relates a lot to movie theaters, to the theater itself. You know, the whole idea of having this big screen up there, and you have to see, you have to look at it. And they were still driving movies when I was a teenager, I was 16 or so. So, you know, it was driving, we had this huge panel up there. And it just seemed like, and that idea, and the idea that it's a story and it moves from left to right, you know, the whole idea of a film was just fascinating. Right? You got this big screen and things are happening in the screen, you know, in that frame itself. But then when I did start painting murals, it seemed like a natural thing to do, because I actually made a big painting before I actually made a painting on a wall. And then, for some reason, it just seemed like it was like the idea of a square appealed to me a lot. The idea of making a composition that fits into a square, like a comic strip or a cell in a film strip or something like that. In fact, I remember doing that when I was in junior high. We did like little paint drawings on clear celluloid, little strip. So that experience and ideas just kind of came together. It just seemed. I guess I like to see things, you know, in a I have good peripheral vision, so I like to see things out here and forward. It just seems to work really well. And a lot of times, and I guess I have to tell you, you know, a lot of times, I said that I start with the figure, and I really let the figure and the subject matter kind of dictate to me what the format's going to be. Is it going to be a square painting? Is it going to be wide? And how wide? You know, how much space can it hold? Can this one figure hold without it seeming superfluous? And how am I going to guide the eye around the subject matter? I mean, around the canvas itself. You know, so a lot of times they grow. In other words, they grow. Start a composition, it grows. It goes this way. Maybe it'll go this way or that way. That's why I started with pencil and paper all the time. Just, you know, and I leave myself space so that in case it grows. Or I'll attach another piece if I feel like it needs to have more space. You know, maybe the figure is too cramped, it needs to be spread out. Or it does technical things, but I think they make a big difference to me anyway. How things appear.
Can you maybe talk about the fall garden behind you? I think that I think it would be interesting to hear you maybe break apart some of the symbolism in a painting that you might include, or you know, who those family members might be, and maybe the story that is going on there.
Well, since they are based on people that I know, I mean, there are conversations that are going in my head when I'm doing these paintings and say, well, what could they be talking about, and personalities. But it's based on real things. We had talks, we had gardens. We were tenant farmers, but we always had an area where we could plant our own garden. And I think a lot of times we took care of other people's gardens and stuff like that. But the idea is just that, you know, the father and the sons are the ones doing the work. You know, that they do the work in the fields, and at that time, that's kind of the way people lived. You know, something I can talk about is the whole idea of work versus, or in other words, not only the significance of work, but how work can sometimes distract or detract from other things. In our case, you know, my father, we had to work, but it got to a certain point where he wanted it to be more, us to be thinking more forward. In other words, don't try to make a living as a laborer in your own life. And so more school, education, learning, being a good citizen, being just a good person, and that was, I guess, more evident later on when I was about 7 or 8 years old. because it got to the point where, you know, like you said, we got all these brothers, this family, a lot of people would go up to Michigan or Minnesota and work as minor farmers. And that was very common, you know, most people are Mexican, not most, but a lot of them did. And my father didn't want to do that because he thought it would take away from being in school, you know, moving and coming back, and so you get used to this kind of lifestyle. And he really didn't want that. That's why I have them dressed as though maybe they've come back from school. You know, maybe they've gotten off the bus, got back from school, and so they're not. You know, because they're dressed like they've gone out into, you know, normal society, and where you still can wear clothing. Like this, I guess there is certain symbolism with water. You know, water being a sustaining and everything, you know, life source, and a central part of any family or community. There's some symbolism there, but mostly, you know, the garden itself to me is very symbolic. It's growth, of course, there's sustenance, rebirth. Once again, you know, the significance of the land and the soil, which goes back again to my family's experiences of coming from Mexico, from Guanajuato, which is really considered the breadbasket of Mexico. If you're not familiar with it, it's where there's a lot of agriculture, and there's livestock, and it's been known as that for a very long time. And so they have a very strong tradition of agriculture. And so that's what it relates to, just the idea of agriculture, the land, living, agrarian existence, and then, you know, then kind of being the future. What does the future hold for them? And I guess that's the question that I present.
How did you, as you were conceptualizing this exhibition, I'm curious to how you chose your subject matters, because so many of them are these just beautiful vignettes into a private scene, or, you know, moments of, you know, I don't know, I guess, you know, granting a viewer access into this intimate space. Yeah.
Well, when we met, I had started this one. This one had been in the works for a while, and this was also an idea that I'd had for a long time, and I did a drawing of it, and it's based on a photograph that I took. So I had this one, and then because I knew that the show was going to open in spring, around Easter time, I did this one, because I thought of an Easter party for memory, and that it would relate to this. And I've been wanting to do this idea for quite a while. You know, I hadn't located an image of the house that I wanted to try to portray. You know, it's supposed to be based on a real house that was torn down, unfortunately. So I did this idea, and then I knew that I wanted to have a larger work in the show. And Bill had seen the drawing for this, and he had responded to that. So I developed this one, and I knew that it was going to probably take me more time because of the size. So I wanted to start it, you know, early on, and then this whole idea led me to the tenant farmer, which they're tenant farmers, and it led me to the image of the woman with the green beans and the cats, and it's based on my grandmother, my father's mother, who lived to be 80-something or other. You know. I remember her very well. The stories were that my younger brothers would sneak out of the house after dinner and go over and smoke cigarettes with my grandmother. She hand-rolled Bugler cigarettes, and so they'd smoke cigarettes. And she was, you know, just always, you know, working and energetic and taking care of us, you know. In my little narrative, I explained how she could take the corn off a cob, the dry corn, but using another one. And I don't know if you've ever seen that, but these old farmers, Mexican farmers, you know, they take a mazorca and they take another one. And there you go. they kind of turn it right off. And I was always amazed by her, you know, how she did all these things, you know. Her hands were, you know, rough, rough hands. And so I thought of that, and I thought of memories of her, and, you know, and so I imagined this scene, like maybe she's sitting out, you know, cleaning, preparing dinner, and out with the cats, and you know, the cows are getting ready to soak up the shade, you know. And my idea actually was that there was somebody approaching, and that's why she's looking out. There's somebody approaching the property or her, and so the cat is looking, and she's also kind of attentive towards looking out in that way, 'cause, you know. And then there's a narrative behind that too, you know, because we lived out in the country, and there was I told Bill, there was a railroad that ran behind, and my dad said that there was an African-American man that would stop by like 2 or 3 times a year, and I guess he rode the rails or something, and he would stop by and he would have, my grandmother would fix him some food or something, and they would talk, I don't know what they did, but I mean, I thought those were pretty interesting stories, you know, you don't hear about those kind of things. You know? So anyway, so that led me to that, and then, let's see, and then I did the beekeepers. You know, and a lot of it has to do with things that I've seen, you know, in the news itself also. I mean, I relate to things that happened years ago, but I keep seeing things about beekeeping and bees and all this sort of stuff. And, well, we used to have bees, we used to have the boxes and all. My grandparents did, and they had some bees, and I remember many times bringing honeycombs, you know, set them on the table, and get little kids and chew the wax and all this sort of stuff. So I said, well, I can relate to that. I like bees and all that. So I did this image, and it's based on some of my uncles, you know, and different things that I read about, and you know, things I've heard, and all this and that. So I did that one, and then this other one, the new home, that piece. Well, actually, I'm sorry, I forgot. The one over here with the shepherd. Now, because I was relating to my father's experiences, I did that one actually before I went to the tenant farm. And that relates specifically to stories that my father told me about when they immigrated from Mexico, and it's, you know, kind of a lot of chaos, and you know, and he was only 5 years old when all of this happened, but he remembered it so well that he would tell us all the time, not all the time, but whenever there was occasion appropriate, he would talk about that, you know. I guess so that we could compare our life to his life. So, you know, how can you compare what you're going through and having to pick up and leave, you know, and with your family, you're 5 years old, and you don't know where you're going, you say, let's go, and we're going, and just the trauma that would have been involved in that, I think, it was pretty significant. In fact, he told me that they went into Leon, maybe, to catch the train, and because there was so much chaos that he actually got lost, so they lost him. And he's like, where's everybody? You know, and finally they found him. And they said, well, there you are. You know, we're going to leave you. I mean, can you imagine that? So those things have always stayed in my mind. And I was like, well, I need to do something with it. You know, and again, it's like, well, is our audience going to be interested in this? And I can talk about it for days, but will the painting be interesting enough for people to be engaged with it? You know? So that's why I did that. And then the others as well, they relate to that experience. The one over here, the contraband, it relates to my father's story of when he was, I guess, about 4 or 5 years old. And the first time they left Mexico, they came across, they waded across the river illegally. But at that time, there was, I don't even know that there was, you know, what the policies were. But anyway, they did that because they had to. And he said, I crossed over my dad's shoulders, you know, we waded across the river, and there you go. But then they went back, and they came back. They went back 10 years later, and they decided that they were looking for family, and they couldn't find anybody. And they, you know, he said, well, we've gotten used to living in the United States, you know, and they made fun of me because I wore knickers, like in 1928 or something like that. Yeah, they said because they lived in Texas from like 1920 to 28 or something like that, 29, before they went back. And he said that when he went back, they recognized him as an American right away. It's like, you're American, wearing knickers and all that. They made fun of him. And that was just a little anecdote. But they decided to come back, and you know, and so that's kind of what that's about. And they came back. They went to Laredo, and they wanted to immigrate legally, so they spent a whole summer working, picking cotton, and say, well, we go back, once a week to the immigration officer. No, we can't. We're not letting anybody in. So finally, they found an officer that said, yeah, we'll let you in. Sign. And the story he told me was that when they went to sign, they couldn't sign. They didn't know how to write. They could hardly read, couldn't write. And so they just made an X and said, well, we'll let you in. But, my dad said, well, he let us in. He made a point of telling us that I'm going to let you in, but I want you to make a point of receiving an education or somehow get an education, learn how you can function in this country very well.
You mentioned the 1920s. That's around the end of like the Mexican Revolution, and that's when they were up in like Laredo and towards the border. That's when all the turmoil with the Zapatistas and a bunch of other Robin Hoods and just outlaws. Is that something that eventually drove them out of Mexico?
Of Mexico, yeah, it was mostly that. It was mostly because they were in central Mexico, Guanajuato, which is a very strong state. But there was different people always going in and out. In other words, like a lot of times, the government forces would come through and say, okay, we need those horses, we need and you're coming with us. And so that would happen. Then the other group would come by, so Pancho Villa's coming through. And so, he wants you, and so you go with him. And so there was a lot of, and they were just workers. They were not politicians. They were not anything like that. So you're right, they were always overrun. They're like, this group, that group, you just want to stay clear of it. And it finally got to the point where there was, you're right, there was a lot of different groups and things that went on, for different reasons. Finally, I think the incident was that there was an explosion. Dynamite was set on the rail that was nearby where they.
That's where they mine, right? In Guanajuato.
They did a lot of
dynamite.
Yeah, but the incident was that there was somebody set off some dynamite, and so the government came in and blamed people that lived adjacent to it, which was the case in our family. So, and they just figured, there's really no hope. Plus, we did have some relations in Texas. My dad had two aunts that were married, and they lived in Maxwell, Texas. And so they knew, and even before then, like my grandfathers worked, both of them actually, on the railroad, building railroads, kind of like the bracero, but they would go like through Texas up into Oklahoma, Kansas, and they were digging and all this stuff. So they were familiar with the area, and they had some family. But yeah, that's why they decided to integrate. Well, the first time, and then finally the second time. It was just too much chaos. Hard to live that way. And then, so there's the cruzando, or the contraband, and then the boy with the lamp, the kerosene lamp, which I remember very well, kerosene lamps. We had electricity, but a lot of times I'm not sure why. Probably my dad was trying to save money. So you lights out, 8 o'clock or whatever it was. And probably so. And so and my brothers talked about they would read, by kerosene lamp quite often. They learn how to read. Very well. And then finally, I guess, towards I think the last work I did was the woman with the block of eyes. And it was kind of a nice cap to me as far as the series of work is concerned, because a lot of these pieces for me, they're very emotional. They raise a lot of emotional memories. And this one is too, but I thought that it would be a nice way to kind of present something that's more, I guess, settling, kind of more comfortable and more peaceful in that way, And then the other one of the women making queso fresco, or their domestic scenes, their interior scenes, they're a little different from being out of doors, and they're relating more to, I guess, to the women in my community, of the things that they did, what part of the roles that they played, stuff like that. So that's kind of the way the stories develop. That's like my drawings, I let them wherever they take me. That's kind of where I go. And if this image suggests something that stays in my mind, then that's the next thing that I'm going to do. And it's always worked. It doesn't, instead of trying to think too far ahead of I'm going to do these 10 well, you know, if you do one, it's significant, something else may occur that's a little bit more interesting. And even the compositions, they always change, you know. When I was younger, I was like, oh, okay, this is it. I'm going to do this. But now, I guess I consider more things, you know, in terms of the arrangement, how people read it, you know, how people are going to view it, what response it might have. And I want to really get it as good as I can get it. And I can paint more readily than before, so it doesn't bother me that I'll have to change something, you know. It's like, well, that's not right. Take it out. You know, have to do that. And I've done that many times. Change the composition from what I thought it was going to be, and they usually turn out better.
Have you done that with any of the ones hanging up in here?
Change the oh sure, yeah. You know, first of all, I was gonna, like some of these figures, I'm gonna have maybe more things in there, and I didn't. Like this was a slightly longer composition. I shortened it a bit. It was more of a landscape or panoramic, and you know, to get the figures in, and I wanted to leave enough sky so you could get a sense of the light and the time of year. So I decided to make it a little higher and a little bit wider. So those changed. This one changed. I think the figures in the background changed quite a bit. That one didn't change. This, you know, it's a process, and it did change from point of view. I was going to have it from a different point of view. I was going to have it from the back, looking out, and this side looking this way. And so I consider all of those things. It's like putting on a play. You know, you've got your action going on, and these people are going to see this, they're going to see that, and so I think of a setting, and then I think of all the points of view that I could potentially take. You know, this angle, that angle, what time of day, and the time of day, it lends itself to the narrative, but also to the shadows. You know, I use shadows to connect the composition, which is an old technique. You know, Rembrandt, Tintoretto, they all use the shadow, you know, the dark and light to connect things like a photograph can. You know, so I think all those things into consideration. And the lighting is this shadow more interesting than this shadow, or can it relate more to this? You know, how can I connect this composition by using simple things like lighting, where the shadow's being cast? So yeah, I consider all of those things. Yes.
How much of this landscape or lifestyle still is happening in this place of memory? Like, are there still farmers in your family? Or does the farm still have?
No, there's not. Not in my immediate family. Nobody went into farming. It's just very difficult. It's a very difficult lifestyle. My grandfather, that we still have on my mother's side, their homestead. They kept their homestead, but they don't. You know, they're elderly. They don't. Maybe some of my cousins will take it up. It's not. It's a very difficult lifestyle. I think it's probably very enjoyable, but it's probably very, very difficult to do that. We don't really do that, you know. But we always like going back and visiting my aunts.
But among your brothers and sisters that grew up with you, farming in rural settings, how many of them still live in more rural settings?
None of them.
Right. And then how this wonderful oral history that your father wanted to be sure that the farm caused you guys, and this rural setting causes you to share and to know the stories that you don't have. In your families now, do you think that still lives as actively among
Oh yeah, and the sharing of the family history and the story. Oh yeah, we do. We still share that. We talk.
I wonder
about
if it can be as vivid the further you get away from that. I wonder if it can be as vivid in terms of their recollections as your own.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, for example, if they share those stories. I know they do with their children and everything else. You know, I don't know how they relate to it. You know, they live in the city and everything. They probably don't like to go out and, you know, get stickers in their feet and stuff like that. But that may change. I mean, that may all change. And as people grow, they change their point of view. But no, my brothers, they they didn't go into farming. You know, in fact, a lot of them were very good students. They went to college. Some of them became professionals and brother's a lawyer, principal, teacher, administrator, an educator. They went to college and they did different things, you know. They're all very hardworking. I know that. I know they wake up early like farm wood. That's not out of them. And they do relate to all these things. I mean, they enjoy my paintings and they talk about it. But anyway, when we get together, we do talk about those things. And, you know, the older ones can remember certain things that obviously I can't remember. And they know more about that. And it was a very hard life, you know. I think it was, you know, if you, it's hard work, you know, and you're out there, you know, you're isolated. You know, luckily we lived close to Lockhart, we lived close to Austin, San Marcos, and so we were not, you know, like completely isolated. And you know, they like school, they like learning, and they liked all these things.
So in terms of your exposure to art, when you're living out in the country in Lockhart, going to Lockhart schools, talk about your exposure and when you became aware that this is something you may really want to pursue in terms of your own.
I was exposed to art throughout my life, really, in terms of drawing and painting, things like that. Not only through school, of course. In 6th grade, we had a wonderful teacher, Miss Smith. She'd been a career teacher, you know, and she showed you everything, you know. 6th grade, like, I was talking about perspective and how to draw, you know, simple shapes. And a lot of arts and crafts, too. But, you know, those things were very, very significant. And I had art from 6th grade through 12th. And then I had brothers, older brothers, two of them, they used to like to draw and paint as well. And they're very capable, you know, portraits, landscapes, and stuff like that. They never went beyond that. They never started doing things from their own imagination or of their own concept. But they were very good at, you know, replicating what they see, portraits, whatever it was. And so I saw them doing that. And so I kind of started picking it up, you know, started trying to get doing it. But I have to say, for having grown up in a small town, I received a lot of art education. And then in high school, we had a very enthusiastic art teacher. She had been to UT, gone to UT, and did a lot of different things, you know, like would expose us. She brought in, you know, posters of Picasso, you know, Kandinsky, and Braque, and, you know, Dali, and all the modern artists, which you probably wouldn't see otherwise, you know, and so she put them on the wall, and just so they're there, and she would bring in commercial things. Like in the 70s, you know, art education for high school kids was a lot about becoming a commercial artist. And so, you know, she would bring in album covers and things that, you know, and which were very significant, you know, to see. A lot of them were photographs, but a lot of the times they were illustrations or paintings on the covers. And that was very, very significant. I was into drawing, and I was into painting, and I was always into writing. When I was 9th or 10th grade, before then I started writing stories similar to this, actually, not in great detail. But I remember in 6th grade, they had UIL, ready writing, and they would give you several topics. And I wrote, the topic I wrote about was the person I admired the most. And I wrote about my father. I said, I admire my father because he wakes up in the morning early, he comes into work, you know, make sure that the school is running. And my father was a custodian at the junior high. And so sometimes I would go to school early with him, like to be there at 7, you know. I'd have the whole school to myself. But I wrote about that, you know, and it was just kind of it came naturally. And I won the first prize. I'm like, really? So since that time, you know, I always had all these kind of narratives, the idea of a narrative that I could either write about, and then later, of course, I became more capable of drawing, and I could do drawing with that. But I guess the most significant part of my arts education prior to going to college was having an arts and education program in Lockhart. We had, through the state, they brought in, they funded a program where working artists would go and work with students, doing different things. They could either design a project or do a demonstration or bring in another artist to give a demonstration of their work. And so they would bring in artists, mostly from Austin, sculptors and people like that. They would do demonstrations. And we took a lot of field trips. That was significant. We went to Dallas. I don't think we came to Houston, but we went to Dallas. And that was my junior and senior year. And up until then, I'd been, drawing and painting a lot. And that's when I had that opportunity to do a large painting. My teacher said, I gotta let this guy do something. So they got me, who made this huge canvas. The students in home economics sewed 2 pieces of canvas together. They seamed it so I could have like a 7 by 13 piece of canvas. And we stretched it, and primed it. They found me a studio in Lockhart, Texas. The Post Register they had a storage room. It's probably still there, and it was just a room. It had one light bulb hanging down on the ceiling, and it had one little window with bars, looked like a jail actually. And that was my first studio, my first painting studio. Sometimes it's best to be naive and not know anything. And so that's how I started. I would go on Saturdays or after school, and I worked on a painting for like 4 or 5 months. And I finished it, and then at the end of that 4 or 5 months, I got a bigger studio actually. I got a studio on the town square in Lockhart, Texas. Stevens Electric, they owned the building. They had like 2 empty floors, beautiful space. I mean, dance studio spaces. And it had been a band with this plush red carpeting, birch eye maple, paneling on the wall. It's beautiful spaces. And so they let me go up there and paint. And there was no electricity, so I could work during the day. So I would have to say that that experience is very exceptional. I mean, for having gone to school in a community of 8,000 people, to have had that experience, it's unbelievable, really. So that was my arts education. But after that experience, I decided that I wanted to study to become an artist. And luckily, I got accepted to a couple of colleges, and I went. But I went out to El Paso first, and then came back to Austin and studied with different people, as many different people as I could. So I do have to give credit to having started early, having gotten in my head that this is something to do, it's worthwhile, and having support from teachers and my family. Like the first painting I ever did was in my parents' living room. They didn't mind, and I was like, did a little painting, and no big deal. So that and getting used to living around. Richard Stout said he has a home, his studio in his home, and so I've had that all my life. I've had the paintings in there, and I can look at them any time of day. To this day, I like to see things at different times of lighting, and early in the morning, late in the day, something like that. So I've been very fortunate and meeting people like Bill Reaves, going to Palacios, and all the people that I did those little residencies for, they're worthwhile, because it just got me in the habit of being an artist, going in there when you have time, and doing something, even if it's in the morning for an hour or 2. And I still give that kind of advice to other artists. They say, I don't have time to do my work, all this and that. And I say, well, if you just have an hour in the morning, go in the studio and jot down an idea and go through the motions of setting up your studio. At least it gets you thinking in that way. And so that's been a great experience.
Any more questions for Fidencio?
Is there anything else?
If not, then we'll kind of close this formal part of the discussion, but Fidencio will be here for the rest of the afternoon, and I encourage you to come take a closer look at all of his wonderful paintings. There's so many details that you really don't know and really get a better sense of the narrative until you're up close and really inspecting them.
Well, there's some art students here. I know that you're all art students. You're an art student, all of them? You're going to U of H or?
We graduated.
Graduated U of H.
Oh, okay. Y'all are painters or?
Yes, painters.
What kind of things do you paint?
I make abstract paintings.
Mine are more like objects that I turn into paintings. Like I made a.
They're 3-dimensional.
Well, they're on the wall, but like for example, I just made a diving board, but I'll recreate the whole thing and panels on the wall, kind of like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Were you guys at U of H?
I'm about to graduate this May, and I paint screenshots.
Was it
I paint screenshots.
Screenshots?
Yeah, like what you see on your phone, the way things are like sort of laid out on your phone. And if not that, then like the screen in general.
Screen, so you're taking with the computer images and all this and that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting, you know. I didn't grow up with computers, but it's a very interesting, great experience. Couldn't have done all these without a computer. not in 6 months. Great tool.
I asked you if all this kind of look the way it looks in your paintings now, because I came from Guanajuato. I was born there, and the landscape is actually very similar to what it looks like there, except we have hills in the distance. But you were talking about how it's really hard for someone to be a farmer nowadays, and you were saying how it was like the breadbasket, and I think sadly it's changing really quickly.
In Mexico?
In Guanajuato, yeah. We're from a place near Celaya.
Central.
Yeah, it's near Leon also. And lately what's been happening is that there's a lot of industry that's coming in. So a lot of the landscape that I haven't gone back since I left in 2001, but I still go on like Google Maps, and because now that car goes through there and takes pictures. And the landscape looks totally different. Sadly, it's not. It's a lot more concrete and factories.
A lot more people, more populated, I'm sure.
And because where I came from, there was a lot of dairy farming, and I think because of subsidies and stuff, like it's cheaper to actually buy dry powdered milk from the U.S. Than to buy local milk and sell that. So a lot of dairy farmers, including my dad, lost a lot of business like around the 1980s.
People can't afford it.
Yeah, and it's totally different. So that's why I asked if the landscape that you remember looks like this now.
Yeah, no, I've never been to one. I don't know what it was like. My father was born there, but I've never actually even been to one.
Oh yeah.
I've ridden on the train to San Miguel de Allende. I've been to Saltillo and Monterrey. But,
you should go before it changes too much.
Yeah, I guess I should. I mean, I know it's a really beautiful state.
It is.
And then the cities, Guanajuato City, I guess, and Leon, and those are the two main cities, I think.
Yeah. Whenever I bring it up, people ask me if I know the cities, like the Guanajuato one, the main one is where most people go, where the mummies are and stuff. But I've never been, so we kind of stuck to the outer skirts. Yeah.
That has a very interesting history. It's a very interesting state. It was. I read about it and how they started mining. Mining led to, of course, people come in, but they brought in cattle because they had to feed the workers. And a lot of people from all over the world actually went there to work when they discovered silver. And so then they brought in the cattle, which led to the leather industry. They're known for making shoes, right? And that's how it started, because there was so much surplus leather that they said, well, we might as well make something with it. So they started making shoes, and now they're very well known for their shoes that they make. Something like that.
Yeah, I had an aunt who sold shoes, and she would make weekend trips to Leon
to buy shoes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of.
I didn't know that's what happened though.
That's how it happened. Yeah, that's how it happened, because they discovered silver, so you have to have work, and of course people flocked to it, like 1949 gold rush from all over, and so it's a very diversified population in terms of ethnicities. A lot of diversity. Some of that led to cattle to feed people, and then of course the leather, which led to the leather goods becoming kind of a staple of their economy. It's kind of how it developed. It's very interesting. Is there any other comments or questions? Thank you very much for being here.
Yes, thank you, Fidencio. This was so wonderful.